flags in the whole world have covered up blood and loss.
The Confederate flag that's flown is connected to racism.
Yeah, you know, when you boil it down to it, slavery did have a lot to do with the Civil War.
I wouldn't think that that flag should come off the street.
The flag itself does represent a lot of things to a lot of people.
And it's really hard to generalize the usage of the Confederate flag because it's used in so many different ways.
You see a battle flag, hate it, because that's bad people. No, it's not. It is my ancestors who were willing to die for what they thought was the right idea.
Generation after generation after generation, if you're told this is why it happened and Northerners are the bad guys, then you have no reason to doubt what you've always been told, right?
I never want my rights that I do have to be spoiled.
In Dixieland, where I was born, early on a frosty morn, look away, Dixieland.
We live in a place where anyone can carry any flag out here. There can be a beautiful rainbow gay pride loving flag out here. We can have a peace flag. I, can run with my Roma flag. I have a friend who, when we travel and go to shows, he has his Confederate flag and he wears his North Carolina flag. We have them for our states. It's who we are as a collective. So if we can remember how it brings us together and not how it separates us, I think that's the defining line.
When I moved to North Carolina and saw it, initially I would have told you, not knowing a lot about the region, that's interesting. That's a way that this community communicates their history or where their pride lies.
Well, I think the flag, like any other flag, Confederate flag, American flag, Muslim Brotherhood flag, a flag is a symbol to me, and it represents many things to many people.
I can see the history, I can see the impact, I can see some of the ways that the flag has been used to be a symbol for movements over the course of our history. You would get a variety of different answers from people who use the flag in some way as to why they use it.
The battle flag and the Christian cross of St. Andrews. Let me go back to the beginning of the whole thing. Back in 98 AD, there was a man who was preaching Christianity in the area of Georgia and Russia. The king there did not like it. He said, "Crucify that man." And he said, "I'm not worthy to put on a cross like my Savior. Put me on an X." He said, "Fine, put him on an X." He said, "Nail him." He said, "I'm not worthy to be nailed like my Savior." He said, "Tie me." He tied him. The man knew that tying him would be more lingering and suffering. And he stayed on the cross for 3 days, preaching Christianity and converting thousands. The people went to the king and said, "Can't you see what good this man is doing? Chop him down." He said, "Fine, chop him down." As soon as the man hit the ground, he died. He was 98 years of age. In Greek and Latin, an X stands for CH, for Christ. The Scottish and the Irish and the English put that in their flag to remind them of their Christian heritage. So when we decided to secede from the Union, we wanted something to remind us of our Christian heritage, because we felt as though the Union had lost its Christian ways.
For a lot of people, it just means, I mean, the Confederate flag is associated with being Southern. So I think a lot of people fly the Confederate flag and don't necessarily think of it as anything but a regional identity in some ways. They don't perhaps associate it, or at least within themselves, they don't associate it with racism, or it doesn't have any sort of characteristics like that. They just see it as a symbol of Southernness, or maybe they proudly embrace it as, you know, redneckish. But I mean, I see it as a symbol of the country that it once represented, more specifically the Army that it once represented, but that Army was fighting to maintain white supremacy, which is not an idea that I agree with.
The fact that the Confederate flag brings up North and South boundaries and slavery and non-slavery makes me crazy, because that's just bad history.
The Civil War, in my opinion, from the classes that I took and the conversations that I've had, was about the Southern states' right to keep slaves.
People state that we were fighting for slavery. The North Carolina soldier, 1 out of 15 did have slaves. The rest didn't. So if you think about it, what was the main thing about what they were fighting over? And it was the states' rights.
Well, what does states' rights mean? I mean, it means the state's right to impose its own laws and to run its own affairs the way it deems fit, including keeping slavery or having a slave labor class. And the fear, the states' rights fear, the real only fear amongst the states' rights crowd, was that the federal government may pass a national federal law that eradicates slavery. But when you say, oh, it was really about states' rights, well, it really was about the states' rights to maintain slaves.
The federal government was trying to increase taxes upon the South. Already the South was paying like 83% of the federal taxes. We said, wait a minute, that is unfair. We should have a right to decide about what that money is and how much everybody should pay. And you're overstepping us.
If you look back at what Lincoln was actually trying to do, he was trying to end the war. And he stated in a letter that it did not matter to him whether the slaves were free or not, but if the war did not end in 3 months, he was going to free them all, because we needed the war to be done with. So the fact that when that flag is waved around, it's, oh, slavery, you know, we can't think about that. Slavery has been around before there was ever a flag made.
I would say the majority of students who come through high school today would acknowledge that slavery at least had something to do with causing the Civil War. But that wasn't the case 50 years ago. If you went to high school in Georgia in 1960, slavery had absolutely nothing to do with the Civil War, and you're an idiot for even referring to it. You know, now we live in a little bit of a different age, post-civil rights movement and all that. We realize that, yeah, you know, when you boil it down to it, that slavery did have a lot to do with the Civil War.
I think that when you're looking at whether a flag as a symbol is doing more harm than good, because people say, well, why don't we just do away with it? Do away with this flag that's so controversial. And those questions and that heart racing and that fear or anger that it brings up, then for that individual or that group, I feel like we need to look at how it affects us and why, and then research it and know the history.
I mean, over 650,000 people died in that war. So what more can I do is to honor the men, right or wrong, for what they were willing to lay down their life for.
You've got students and people who recognize that the environment that we exist in with that has all of these symbols, some of which are positive, some of which are negative. It's a really damaged environment that we live in that's really complicated with lots of layers of history, lots of things that conflict. So to apply solutions or to apply perspectives that are pure or real simple generally doesn't work.
I don't necessarily see the Confederate flag as a symbol of racism. It's all in the intention behind the person carrying it and what they use it for.
People can believe different things, and so you can fly your flag and you can think, what I'm flying the flag for, to me it means I'm honoring great-great-granddaddy who died at Gettysburg. You know, maybe you honestly believe that, but you can't be willfully ignorant of the fact that other people see the exact same flag and see it as a symbol of oppression or a symbol of hate or a symbol of white supremacy. Does that mean that every single person who flies a Confederate flag today is a racist or a white supremacist? I'd like to think not.
I honor all the men, North and South, win or lose. They were willing to lay down their life for what they believed in.